Hey, good morning. How y'all doing, you fine, fabulous book people? It's a damn fine day to talk about a book, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to talk about Midnight in the Pentagram by Silver Shamrock Publishing. Now, I have read this book slowly over the course of the last 2 to 3 months. It has a shit ton of stories in it, and because I have not counted them, I will not sit here and count on screen and waste your time. But just a lot of stories. And look, I love books, but I read a lot of them, and so you don't often get to build that relationship and cement a book into your brain pan, into your memory. You don't get to have that love relationship necessarily. Don't get me wrong, I'm loving them most of the time when I'm reading them. But I don't, if I read 100, 120, 150, whatever it is a year, I'm not, cementing those. I'm not taking them with me forever. This one, I am. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that I did read it over the course of 2.5 months. I did, take my time with the stories. I basically shot a video about each story and basically did a mini review on each one. Let's say, for sake of argument, there are 28 stories in here. I don't know if that's correct. But 28 different voices, 28 different stories that center around one of my personal favorite subgenres of horror, which is, the demonic, satanic, biblical aspects of horror. I really get into that shit. I was brought up very religious, so I won't get into my belief system now, but that shit stuck with me, and because of that, I'm able to overlook my current beliefs and just really dig into these stories and just really enjoy them. I mean, we're talking about Blatty's The Exorcist and all these classic biblical Catholicism based type horror, and there's just a ton here. And like I said, all of it's right in my wheelhouse. All of it, if these individual stories were novellas or novels on the subject matter, I would have wanted to read them all. So it was just an excellent experience. And because of that, it is my favorite anthology of all time. It is my top anthology. I know that's a big sweeping statement, but I've read probably 20 or so, 25 anthologies in the last 3-4 years while I've been, doing this thing, and they were all, and a lot of those were great. I mean, the other Midnight in the Graveyard book that Shamrock put out, it was great, and I may have given that one 5 stars. I don't know, maybe 4. I don't know. But then there's a couple. The In Darkness Delight books by Corpus Press. I loved those. I read a couple of folk horror anthologies by Nose Touch Press. So the point I'm trying to make is I have thoroughly enjoyed a lot of anthologies, and this one is my favorite. I have never had a harder time picking my top stories from a book than I did with this one. I mean, it was just damn near impossible. And I went back and I watched all the shorts on shorts, which you should as well, because I'm not going to talk about every story in this book, but there is a short, video on all of these, 27, 28, whatever it is. There's a lot of good stuff here. I mean, a lot of great, again, satanic panic stuff, demonic possession stuff, a lot of it with a twist, though, with a different look, some April 30th, the pagan holiday of fertility and spring coming, and witches night stuff, and just all kinds of great things. I mean, some just raw, gory horror. Some of it, like found footage type stuff. There's one story in here that does coming of age in a short story better than any example I can come up with. There's just a ton here, and just a cast of writers, just an excellent cast. I mean, Graham Masterson, Al Going Back, Laurel Hightower's in here, Kat Cavendish, James Newman, Todd Keisling, Stephanie Ellis, Chad Lutzky's in here, Kenneth McKinley, Tim Meyer, Brian Keane, and I will go so far as to say that the Brian Keane story. A lot of times when I read an anthology like this, I'll see something like, oh, Josh Mallerman's in there, or Brian Keane's in there. Oh, they've got a Richard Matheson story in this anthology. And normally, not always, but normally, those stories are, I guess, lackluster. Maybe they're not that particular author's best work, and you feel that they just included the story to attach that particular author to the anthology. Well, the Brian Keane story in here, that is not the case. It's probably the longest story in the book. And it is a great story, a great wartime story about Iraq, and how it's historic, epic. The history of it, as far as it being like the Fertile Crescent and Babylon and this ancient knowledge and stuff, and just a lot of cool bits in that story. And I'm talking about it now because it's not in my top four, but picking my top four, geez, it was hard. I'm going to talk about a few stories that I really enjoyed that did not make the top list. But the Corn Maidens is the very first story in the book, and I believe, let me check because I got to be able to tell you this. I believe that's Brian Moreland. I didn't write it down here. Yeah, The Corn Maidens by Brian Moreland. I loved that story. It was a wonderful opening. And, having finished it, with knowing that I had 27 or whatever it was stories left to read, I was like, damn, this one's going to be in the top, but it's right outside of it. But, it's got a female lead. She's beaten and banished, and it's, she's on the road and traveling, and she gets picked up by this, group of strangers taken to this village in the corn. It's got, midsummer feel to it. Children of the Corn, got a bit of Pet Cemetery. I mean, a lot of influences you could feel going. I mean, human sacrifice stuff, a very folksy horror feel. It is a damn fine story. And then we go right into Father McLeod. It's by Tony Tremblay, and I love this one too. It's an exorcism story, but it's it really ratchets up, the violence and the ability of what a demon can do to the body it possesses. I mean, it just ratchets that up, from what we've seen in The Exorcist. I mean, the damage that it can inflict is just wild. And this priest, he has to do some pretty messed up shit to try to save his nephew. And it's got a really, really great ending. I call it the Devil's Advocate effect. I think that's the right film. But the Al Pacino, Keanu Reeves film where, like, at the end of it, everything's resolved. They're leaving the courtroom, and that little court reporter, is talking to him, and then, they turn and walk away, and it's a happy ending, right? And then it fades, and he fades back into the Al Pacino character, and you're like, oh, shit, It kind of had an ending like that. So, I mean, those are a couple stories. Another couple that I want to mention, Todd Keisling story is great. It's kind of a folk horror feel. I think this is the one. Yeah. So we're following like a 6th grade girl, and her mother and grandfather have passed away, but they were pagans, and they worshipped this deity, the Nameless, and they had these standing stones like out on the edge of their farm. But mom and grandpa have passed away, and dad has decided to convert him to Christianity. She's been pulled from her school and put in another school. She keeps getting kicked out of school. She's being abused by her brother. And she goes out to these standing stones. I mean, everything she loved, which was her mother and grandfather, and kind of as a side thing, the religion that they followed has been taken away from her. And she goes out and visits these standing stones, and an opportunity presents itself. But it's a hell of a story. Now, My Body by Wesley Southard, again, not one of my top 4, but it just won a Splatterpunk Award. I just saw that. Takes place in Evansville, Indiana, which is basically my hometown, or right close to my hometown. We've got a French restaurant, it's coming to this place that nothing else can seem to keep the doors open, because it's just, nothing else is successful there, but it's serving this wonderful French cuisine. And it's got gore and body horror. Cynthia's our main character. She's a food critic, and the food just, it's addictive. I mean, people get some of it, and then they want more and more and more, and it starts to turn people violent, and it's a hell of a story. So let's see if there's any other here. Second Sight, I think that's by Alan Leverone, because I didn't write it down, but it's about an ocular transplant. A woman that's been blind her entire life gets the opportunity to see, and that opening scene where she gets to see for like 10 minutes before they have to replace the gauze, because they don't want her to be overwhelmed. I mean, just beautifully written, but with this new sight comes horrible nightmares, and it's just a cool story. I've already talked about the Brian Keane story. Now, Al Goingback has a story in here called Witch's Night, and it is one of the finest examples I can come up with of coming of age in a short story. I mean, 3 male characters, a female character. In a very short amount of time, he made me really attached, really invested in these characters and in what was going to happen to them. Now, ultimately, that story has a horrific, I guess you can call it gutsy ending that I was not in love with. I wanted things to work out for someone, and they didn't, I guess. But anyway, so I enjoyed that one as well. But again, some of my favorite authors are in here. Lutsky. Lutsky's got a more comedic piece in here. There's some others in here. There, Kenneth Cain, who edited the book. His is called Dog Eat God, I think. Dog Eat God. It's more of a comedic piece too. But there's just so many great stories. And picking my final 4 was hard. But thus, here we are. Here we are to my final 4 stories in this book. And let me make sure that I'm going to get these right. All right. So, number 4 on the list is Legion Cast Forth by Robert Ford. It's another story of demonic possession. Very biblical. Gets into the story of of Jesus casting the legion of demons out into this herd of swine, this herd of pigs, and then the pigs run off the cliff. It's so that is taken literal. I mean, that a demon, it's easier to get a demon to leave a body if it's got someplace else to go. So exorcism and possession go hand in hand with pig farming. And so this one particular pig farmer, Cletus, he's got priests showing up all day long with bodies that need to be exorcised, and takes them out to the barn, bloop bloop, puts the demon in the pig, and that's it. But they're wearing him out. I mean, he's working. They're coming to his house 9-10 times a week. He's running through pigs like it's going out of style, and so he wants to renegotiate, but the Vatican won't renegotiate his contract, and so he figures if he's not going to make it up in money, he'll make it up in volume. So he starts putting this possessed pork back out on the market, and if you consume the pork that had a demon, it's a hell of a thick story. Crazy good biblical stuff. I loved it. It's my number 4. So what else we got here? Number 3, Brujeria by Michael Patrick Hicks. This is the one that's kind of like a found footage thing. It's not really. It's like a mysterious, mystical, film rumored to exist. Maybe it doesn't even exist. This famous director supposedly shot it back in the day, and it was his effort to film the devil. And so this all happened in the past, but current day, our rich director, and he's got a friend, they worked together on an early film, and the director just skyrocketed. The friend didn't. I mean, he just kind of plays bit parts here and there, but they've remained friends, and he invites him out to his house. There's other characters, nice build up, nice setup, a lot of cool conversations and things going on the side as we build to basically watch this film. And it's got a lot of cool bits about other films in there. Like, you've heard the stories about like Poltergeist and how, it was cursed, or Rosemary's Baby, or Amityville, or whatever it was. It had a lot of cool bits about other classic horror films in there, just conversation pieces as they're eating tacos and getting ready to watch Brujeria. it's a cool story. That's my number 3. So my number 2 story in here is The Red Butcher of Wrocław by Graham Masterson. In this one, a film crew is in Poland. They're shooting a film. It is cold as hell. It makes mention that it has not been cold here, this cold since the winter during World War II. They're basically waiting for the weather to break so they can shoot these final scenes. They're all hanging out in this hotel bar. The director has his young daughter with him. And, there's kids outside playing in the snow, building snowmen, throwing snowballs. He lets her go out and play, takes his eyes off of her for a second, and she disappears. And there's a church next door, and someone said that they saw her going into the church with a priest. You walk into that church, and when you walk into the church, everything, starts to really, read in this cinematic fashion. I mean, you can see this church and the architecture and the layout of the room, and then there's a lot to it, and it has a wicked twist in that particular story. So we're down to number 1. We're down to my number 1 favorite story in this book, and it is The Furious Poor by Amanda Hard. A brother and a brother-in-law. The sister, the wife, has died. There is a beautiful bit in here. It talks about she was killed by a car bomb, but it talks about how they were in, where were they? They were in Barcelona. And I actually read this quote in my short on this one. But, she wanted to go out and get some figs, and he's watching her from the hotel window, and she's walking along the sidewalk, and her white hat is bobbing as she walks, and she gets to the corner, and she turns around to look at him, and he said, I was expecting her to turn around and wave, and I watched her head start to turn, and then I watched them blow her up. And it's just such a sudden, I mean, you knew she died. I know that you knew that she died at that point, but it was just a sudden change of direction. Just a really, really beautiful paragraph. I mean, for such a ugly thing, but it's got pieces about this bum fight club, like the two guys, they go to watch this fight, and again, the brother-in-law, the husband in this situation, he's like this rich whiskey distiller. He's got this family passed down business of this rich, expensive whiskey distillery, and you kind of feel like the brother's there to kind of say, I deserve a piece of that. I deserve some of that. I know you were married to my sister, and because of you, because she was overseas with you, she died, and I deserve a piece of that. But anyway, so that they we open up on them. They're having a few drinks. They're kind of reminiscing, kind of grieving together a little bit, but they go to this bum fight club, and two guys are up in there fighting, and the action is less than inspired, and so he takes a flask of whiskey, and he goes to the corners of the two fighters and gives it to them, and then it just goes wild, like they're all of a sudden really, really, really ready to fight. And so he's got this new invention, this new whiskey that has been inspired by the death of his wife. I mean, he wants to get back at governments that would just kill a woman as collateral damage, just let her be part of the fallout from whatever they were trying to do, and he's got this new whiskey that you put it in a room with a bunch of politicians, and they're gonna things will escalate, I reckon, is the idea. But it brings new meaning to the term demon in a bottle, and it's just an absolute hell of a story. I love the story. I think I said something about the fact that I wanted it to end slightly differently, but that's how it goes. That was The Furious Poor by Amanda Hard. Now, Midnight in Pentagram. I'm telling you, it's my favorite anthology of all time, and it will stay with me forever. A lot of that has to do with the way I read it, nice and slow, story at a time, really focusing on it. But It's a hell of a damn anthology. And I thought I liked Midnight in the Graveyard, and I did. I really liked Midnight in the Graveyard, but I love Midnight in the Pentagram. So, Midnight in the Pentagram, Silver, Shamrock Publishing. Now, it's hard for me to say that this is my favorite Shamrock book of all time, because it is an anthology. But I think it is. I mean, up to this point, my favorite Shamrock book has been In the Scrape by James Newman and Mark Steensland, who both have stories in this book, and I didn't talk about them. Mark Steensland has a story in here called The Black Jar Man that is a hail of, it's probably the most historic of the stories that deals in slavery times. It's got a horrible, brutal slave torture scene. Shit, another thing I forgot to mention, the Brian Keane story. I talked about it. It was like the Iraq War type of thing. There's a torture scene in there that, I've read a lot of torture scenes. I've read a lot of torture scenes involving a man's private parts, but I ain't read anything like this. It's brutal. Ooh. Ooh. So look, I've talked for 21 minutes about this book, and I used to do that when I would talk about every single story. I didn't talk about every single story in this book, and I still talked for 21 minutes. So I'm going to go. Midnight in the Pentagram, 5 stars. My favorite Silver Shamrock publication so far. There's been a lot. I've probably read maybe half of them. I mean, I've read probably 14, 15 Shamrock books, I think. Maybe more. Maybe I'm undercutting myself. But it's absolutely wonderful anthology, especially if you're into satanic, demonic, biblical-based type horror. Loved it all the way through. Tons of great stories. I got to go, people. I got to go. I can't stay with you all day. I mean, I just can't. I know. You want me. I can't. Well, Redbeard, my review. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're enjoying all your books as much as I am. If not, you're reading the wrong books.